So it is another Saturday, the first Saturday of the new year, and it's story time. So today I'm going to tell you about my family's arrival in the United States. My mother, sister, and I had moved to Canada, where my father had lived for 6 years already, when I was 9. And my mother, she thought she had died and gone straight to hell. She hated Prince Rupert. It was this little fishing town, very laid back, 4 blocks in each direction was the town. It had a harbor. It had a fairly good-sized fishing industry at the time, and little tiny boats, pleasure boats, 2 theaters, 2 taxi cab places, just a small town, and it was surrounded by mountains to the east. And my mom, she had been a big city girl in Cologne, and so she was not happy. She just could not be made happy. And so 3 years after we arrived, towards the end of '59, my parents decided we would move to New York, where my uncle Conrad lived and had a deli in the Bronx. So towards the end of '59, we went from Prince Rupert to Vancouver, Canada, where we then waited for our immigration papers to come through. And that was about 3 months. It took about 3 months. So in March of 1960, we finally got the green light to come to the United States. And my father, who had owned a 1956 Plymouth Savoy, which he used for his doing cab business. He was a cab driver in those days. And, I mean, he had all kinds of really good skills, including his years training to be a chef. But somehow he had ended up being a cab driver in Canada, and he had sold that gorgeous big car, and he had bought us I think it was some kind of a Buick, but I'm not sure, an older Buick. So then we took off across the top of the United States, and everything was okay until we got to Aberdeen, South Dakota. And in German, aber then means but then. So it was as if we had good passage until we got to but then. And then the car just simply broke down and it couldn't be fixed. And there we were in Aberdeen with all of our stuff. And we didn't have very much stuff. We didn't have any furniture. We had feather beds and clothing. My sister and I had our dolls. We hadn't even been able to take our comic book collections or our marbles. So everything pretty much pared down to really the essentials. And there we were stuck. So my dad ended up selling his watch, which was a very good watch, and then he ended up selling his wedding ring, then he ended up selling his camera, and he ended up selling the car for parts. And so we were eventually able to get out of Aberdeen and continue our travels. And I don't know what night it was in March, but we were approaching New York City, and it was dark out, and all of a sudden, I'm looking out the bus window. We were on a Greyhound now. You know, we did the rest of our trip to New York on a Greyhound bus from Aberdeen. And so I have my eyes cupped against the glare of the glass, and I'm looking out, and I'm seeing this incredible quantity of lights on the horizon. And they just don't stop. I mean, they go up high and they go all the way across. And I got so excited. I think, even as a kid, I liked to explore places. I was kind of adventuresome. And it seemed like a limitless expanse of place to explore. And I just got so excited as New York got closer and closer. And truly, I fell in love with New York. It happened very, very quickly. It had just about anything that you could possibly want of a city. I mean, it had the food, it had the clothing, it had furnishings, I mean, it had books, it had plays, it had musicals. I mean, it had museums, right? It had dinosaurs, it had mummies, it had just so much. The city had so much. And so we arrived in the Bronx where my Uncle Stelly was, and we lived with him for a few weeks. And it was my introduction to black people. I had not seen black people in Prince Rupert. There were none, not one. I had not seen any in my little town in Germany. One lady, a black woman, had visited when I was about 5 or 6, and I followed that lady all through the town. I was so fascinated by one black person. I kind of stayed at a discreet distance so that she wouldn't be freaked out by my stalking her, I guess. But there I was in the Bronx. I was 12 years old, and I realized for the first time then that white kids growing up in white neighborhoods, not seeing anybody black, we tend to recognize each other really quickly by the color of our hair and the color of our eyes. And, then there's the size, tall, short, fat, thin. But the hair color and the eye color are the two most prominent distinguishing features. And suddenly I was in a sea of black hair and brown eyes. And it was a shock to me that I could not distinguish, especially the boys. The boys tended to have very similar hairstyles. The girls were a little bit easier. The first girl I recognized, Ophelia, sat in front of me, and she had hair like Pippi Longstocking. It came out on either side of her head and stood out sideways. And I was so intrigued by this. And you hear black people complaining about this. White people want to touch our hair, and it's so rude of them. Well, I wasn't trying to be rude. I was just really, really curious as to what the hair felt like, that it could stand out like that, right? And so I actually asked Ophelia one day. I reached forward and I tapped her shoulder and I said, "Can I touch your braids?" She said, "Sure, honey, go ahead." And so I did. And I'm not quite sure how to describe it. It's not quite like cotton wool. It's like something between soft hair and a little Brillo pad. I don't know whether she used mousse or something to help it stand out, but I was so intrigued. And she was such a nice girl. She was my first American friend, because she lived in the projects and my father was terrified that horrible things would happen to me. I didn't get to have a long friendship with her, and then we moved to Queens pretty quickly, and from Queens we moved to Long Island, from Long Island to Brooklyn, and then from Brooklyn into downtown Manhattan. So by 1964 I lived in downtown New York City, and that was an amazing experience for a teenager. I will never forget it. I will never forget those years. And what an experience to have that much of the world at your doorstep. I thank my parents for making that move and bringing me to that time and place to meet the people I guess I was destined to meet, and then have the life unfold that unfolded. And anyway, that's a small piece of my story. I will be telling other parts of it. All of these parts and pieces are really, of course, in my autobiography, and except for that part about the trip across the United States, I think I took that chapter out, so you did not see that before. Alright, it is early January. I hope you are all alright. I hope you all made it through the new year, and that things are going well for you, and that they're looking up. And let us be brave and kind and loving, even if things don't seem to go our way all the time. Alright? Okay. Ciao you.